that all men have inalienable rights to think freely, to talk freely, to write freely their own opinions, and to counter or utter or write upon the opinions of others.
This is from the Creed of the Church of Scientology. Hey everybody, I'm Holly, aka the ScientoloGeek, and welcome to another episode of Going Over the Data series. Today we are going to be starting a new policy called Date Coincidence, and this is kind of a rushed video. I didn't actually have anything planned for today, but if you want access to any of the flag orders, base orders, any of the stuff like that, feel free to email me at scientologeek@gmail.com, provide a valid Gmail address, or you can go to the Discord server link in the description and proceed to DM me from there. Again, valid Gmail address. Without any further ado, let's get started. All right, so this is the HCO policy letter of the 17th of March, 1977, revised on the 2nd of November, 1990. This is called Date Coincidence.
Stats as the first indicator. The first indicator is stats. If you were doing evaluations without looking at stats, that would be silly. You can take a stat book of an org and look over its GDSs,
Gross divisional statistics,
and know their interrelationship and find the outpoint, and then from that outpoint you will know what part of the org's folder to read. If you're doing evaluations by reading the whole folder, you're being silly. You're not interested in that. You're interested in this outpoint because that's your first outpoint. Your first outpoint always occurs in stats. One outpoint from stats was, quote, tremendous quantities of bulk mail being mailed at vast cost after the stats had been brought up by phone regging and then the stats collapsed. That was the first oddity that was noticed from some Decem stats. So it was a stat oddity. They were busy phone regging and they made a lot of money and then they spent it on bulk mail and went broke. So there was an oddity here. It meant the GI did not match the bulk mail. So it's an outpoint. It's inconsistent, contradictory, something's false. So right there, you're looking at a great big cracking outpoint. One or the other of those facts is a lie or something's wrong. And we find out the real outpoint underlying it is wrong target. It's just number of pieces being sent out. They were mailing out flyers several times a week, sending scraps and calling it bulk mail. Alright, so you got your first outpoint in your stats. Now just the fact that an org's stats are down is an outpoint. An org has a monopoly on mental healing.
No. No, it does not. No. Just no. That's all I have to say is no.
It had no rivals of any kind whatsoever on the whole planet from one end to the other.
It has rivals nowadays that are doing way better than it.
In fact, they've got no rivals in the field of healing of any kind.
What? Healing of any kind? Then what do you go to hospitals for? What do you see doctors for? So this almost seems like a way for Hubbard to say we are better than any medical treatment, which is a claim that they shouldn't be making.
What the hell are they doing with their stats down? So you look for a down stat. Having found a down stat, you look to see if that org ever did make money, if it was ever affluent. Just taking it from the standpoint of GI, was this org ever affluent? If the org was ever affluent, it must have been doing something right, so you've got something that approximates its ideal scene. You haven't approached data files yet, that's why stats are separate from the data files. Locating a comparative. So here are two conditions. One, the stats are down. And two, you can't evaluate one thing, as you learned in the data series, unless you have a comparative thing. You have to compare with something, so you can find a period when their stats were up. You find out that in July of 1969, Kokomo was really booming. It had nice climbing stats, and they went up and up and up and up and up. And that rise started on the 6th of June. What did they do in May and June of 69? Those are the two folders you want. Anything you can find out about that org of May or June 69. That gives you something dimly resembling an ideal scene. It isn't the ideal scene, but it certainly is an upstat scene. That gives you a comparative. If you were hot, you would use your telex lines to fill in the missing holes. For instance, if you don't understand something, or if it looked like they moved in 1970 and you can't find out locally, and you don't seem to know whether or not they did, and location seems to be something important here, you could send a telex to somebody who might know and say, where were you located in June of 69? Where was this org located? Can you find out from anybody? It might be important, you see. This is just a collection of a little bit more data. You know that the org was doing something at that time that it isn't doing now. I did just this when I wrote the policy letter selling and delivering auditing. I looked back when HGCs were really making the money and wrote that policy. This policy is in use in one org and they're really going to town. They're using the same system. A guy comes in to sign up. They say, no, you can't sign up for one intensive, thank you. You'll have to buy 7 or something. So he does. He pays the money on the barrelhead. That policy letter comes out of a comparative of HGCs not selling much auditing and having a hard time doing so and what they were doing in an earlier period. So when doing an evaluation, 1, look at your stats. 2, find your outpoint in your stats. 3, find some comparative. Find some period of affluence for the org if you can to give you some ideal scene for that org. That requires something of a plus point evaluation. Now you can do your outpoint evaluation. Because you've already got the outpoint, you don't have to read 8,752 folders. Ethics situation. A while back, I asked the Data Bureau for the folders of a particular downstat org. The first folder that came up wasn't even a complete month's folder. I looked through the folder, read scraps of what I was reading, picked out the reports I wanted, scanned them, pulled the outpoints out of them, counted up the outpoints as to where they were going, and the thing just fell apart. And that was that. It showed the CO was unaware of the fact that personnel was letting him down. That was their admin why. And obviously the CO
Commanding officer.
had to take that person in there off. And obviously there was something wrong with this CO. Now every evaluation done on that org since is grooving straight on down that same why. We've tried to make orders and we've tried to do this, we've tried to do that, but now an ethics situation has developed out of the thing. We got the admin why all right, but an ethics situation developed as we tried to get this in. And notice that the ethics situation develops when you try to get in the admin or tech why. So you don't necessarily have your admin or tech why in the first 3 minutes of play. In another area, the ethics situation developed to such a degree that it then emerged. After an observation mission, after handling was done and orders were directly issued, that they did not execute a single one of them. They were told to revert. They did not. Therefore, an ethics why was looked for. Now, I've just found out why people can't put in ethics. They don't know investigatory tech, and possibly in some cases their own ethics are out. If you put their own ethics in, they will get in ethics further. The reason they assign broad conditions and the reason there are so many ComEvs is they don't know how to investigate.
So you're putting all of ethics problems or ethics conditions and committees of evidence on lack of investigation. You say if you put their own ethics in, you're just putting your own ethics in them. Hubbard's just putting his ethics into the person. It's not their own ethics. Their own ethics have to match Scientology's.
Who when? Someone was given an evaluation to do and had been on that for 5 days. I kept asking all this time, where's this evaluation? People must think I'm rushing them. Evaluators are slow because the evaluation's not being done in the sequence. 1, stats. 2, who was on where. I gave an order to an evaluator to find out exactly when did a certain person come to flag and exactly when did the person go back because that would give you a stat comparison. That was how I found this person was the man of all work and the scooting genius of that org. Now you're talking about ethics. It's the police action called date coincidence. It's how you locate geniuses and murderers. Body found in swamp. Your cousin arrived in town on Tuesday. Body found on Wednesday. Guy departed on Thursday. That's all the police need. That's called date coincidence. That's old-time investigatory tech. It's still with us. So when were they gone out of the org and when did they arrive back in the org and what happened during that period of time? Important. In the case of this particular person, I found out that 2 other execs could leave the org and return and nothing happened, but when this person left, the roof fell in, the front steps collapsed under everybody and the staff went on vacation. I traced this down and I found out that she would run around the org wearing hats in rotation, doing many different jobs. She dived into the tech area and wore the tech secretary hat for a while, and then she dived into another area and she wore that hat for a while, and the stats would go up. In other words, she supported that area by punching one area at a time. That was the way she was operating. So if she was all over the org like that, her obvious post was deputy commanding officer. We put her on that post, and the org has done well ever since. Now that's a sort of ethics action in reverse. That's looking for who really pushes it. You don't just keep on looking for tigers. Tigers are probably more numerous than geniuses, but you could find that certain people have a vast effect on stats. This is how you evaluate a personnel scene. In another org, a guy took over and the place has been crashed ever since, and it was right square on the stats. There is your most obvious ethics investigation by stats. When you don't know, you gotta send an investigatory mission and it's gotta be run well. Otherwise, they just wind up shooting all the people that the staff complain about. If you don't operate on a comparison every time, comparison on admin Y, comparison on the stats, ethics comparisons, if you're trying to operate on a single datum, that single datum won't buy you any pie because it has nothing to compare with. Summary. What the Data Bureau gives us is experience, and that is huge files full of experience. But you've got to recognize what you're reading. You don't read everything. If you do, you're omitting an analysis of the gross divisional statistics and an analysis of who went on when and where at a good time and a bad time. What are you looking for? You're looking for the stat. Look at your GDSs. This is for your admin wise. That tells you the big outpoint. That tells you what information you're looking for in the files, and you're only interested in that information. Start counting up that type of information and see where it lands, and the Y will practically jump out at you out of the folder. It's so easy, it just leaps right out, but you have to know what you're looking at. In writing up one eval, an evaluator verbally gave me more valuable data than she had put into the eval. She was quoting reports. All you want to do is quote the steps of your investigation. You have a criterion when you've got your evaluation all done. Your handling has got to be bright. It's got to be a bright idea that will actually drive those stats up to something which can be operated. And if you do an evaluation that cannot be operated at this stage of the game, you're just wasting your time. Look at your resources. What can you do with what you've got while you improve what you've got? It will all have to be done by a gradient. So the worse off things are, the brighter you have to be. When you do evaluations, you've got to be able to operate the resulting actions. If you write something that can't be operated, nothing will happen. That at once tells you whether you have a good evaluation or a bad evaluation. Do your evaluations in such a way that they are dead on. Bang, bang, bang. And then, that being the case, they've got to be something that can be operated. And the next thing you know, your stats will go up.
So what did we cover? We've covered that stats are the first indicator of outpoints. You can have contradictory stats, such as low gross income, but high amounts of regging and phone calls. It's a way to find down statistics to see when the org was having a problem. You can check for plus points, obviously, when you're looking at an upward trend in statistics, causing the org to boom or expand. And it'll give you a better idea of a better scene. Not an ideal scene, but a better scene. We've learned that ethics situations can develop when trying to get in an admin or tech Y. And he also says when someone can't investigate, when there's not proper investigation being done, there will be more broad ethics and justice actions being taken on the part of the org. And, I mean, I'm not surprised that he says that problems will happen when people don't know his stuff, but more problems have happened with his stuff than without it. So, he also says get information as to who, when, and what was happening with the involved personnel, which seems pretty obvious. If you guys like my content, feel free to hit the like button. If you don't like it, hit dislike. I don't really care. Comment with your feedback or questions, good, bad, or sideways. Subscribe to be kept up to date on future content. Hit the notification bell. Share with your friends and family. Throw it up on Facebook or something. I don't really care what you do with it. Join the Discord if you want to. I'll be happy to talk to you if you guys want. And I will talk to all of you later. See ya.